Hell, it's about time. Klaxus stood there, mouth agape, as he stared at what he would presume was a giant of a man, dressed in the same irregular patterned uniform as everyone else in the room, but he stood just shy of 2 meters tall. Klaxus's fur was on edge as he nearly cowered under the giant's predatory gaze. The towering bald man had tattoos covering every part of his body except his face, and was sucking a burning stick. Looking him in the eye proved to be far more difficult than he initially thought. The abomination's left eye was obviously mechanical, along with shrapnel scars peppered along his eye socket. Emperor, save me. Humans can interface with machines? Klaxus thought to himself as he finally collected himself and saluted the obviously superior ranking officer. First Lieutenant Klaxus Zolnak, reporting for duty! Was nearly squeaked out. His arm came across his chest in his formal imperial salute. Don't salute me, kid, or any officer, especially if we're outside, retorted the giant as he reached his hand out. Lieutenant Colonel James Findlay, and don't call me by my rank outside of briefing rooms. Unsure how to take the new set of instructions that were completely antithetical to current military knowledge, he grasped Findlay's hand and was shook up and down almost violently. The poor Imperial even dropped some of his gear that he was holding as he was being tossed around by the giant. Welcome to the team room, Findlay greeted him, as they walked further in. Findlay's deep, raspy voice broke out. Keep in mind, if you aren't invited here, you'll get the piss beat out of you, so make sure you only walk in here when we want you to. Dead silence reigned in as he noticed that not only Lieutenant Colonel Findlay was eyeing him with predatory eyes. Everyone was. All those eyes told him they had not approved of him yet. Findlay turned around and addressed everyone in the room. He's a temp, so don't fucking kill him. I'm looking at you, Gabe. Following Findlay's glare, he saw an almost unassuming individual with light brown skin. He had a small patch of fur on his head and an even smaller patch of fur on his face. Klaxus couldn't figure out what made this man so dangerous, but questioning the judgment of a senior officer on his own men wasn't in Klaxus's modus operandi. The accusation was followed by a resentful click of the tongue. Findlay sighed and said, Fucking psycho. That's Gabriel, or just Gabe. Don't do anything he fucking tells you to do unless it's cleared by that guy. Findlay pointed at a larger but equally unassuming man with curly black fur on his head, an equally bushy beard and very dark skin. I'm the Operations Sergeant Ives. Just call me Barbecue, the annoyed darker soldier said. Barbecue? Klaxus questioned, his ears twitching in confusion. I'm Haitian? Findlay shook his head and grabbed the Uvial by the shoulder before he could inquire further and started introducing him to the rest of the team. Ignore it. Gabe's our local sociopath. He's one of our snipers and the engineering sergeant. Gabe barely acknowledged the furred mammal's existence with an upward head nod. This is Therese. She's the medic. You call her Doc. You protect Doc. Doc keeps you alive. Klaxus noticed the lightly brown-skinned woman. She was slightly lighter skinned than the Gabe. This one bared her teeth in that unnerving smile that humans thought was being friendly. She looked significantly smaller than the rest of the team. The tattoos she had were running down her neck into her arms, and the tattoos were moving? Under further examination, he noticed that her tattoos seemed to be flowing like a river of thorned flowers and skulls. Sometimes he would spot what seemed to be cartoon characters dodging the thorns and skulls. Then he noticed something else. Emperor, save me, Klaxus muttered. She had mechanical arms. The strange theme continued as Klaxus was introduced to the last 3 members of the team he was attached to. A weapons sergeant by the name of Bo. The clean-shaven man nearly rivaled Findlay in terms of size and equally as pale. The squad liked to refer to him as the Animal Mother. He stared at Klaxus as if he wanted to gut him. Do you eat trash? Klaxus blinked, stunned and confused. What? No. Findlay face-bombed. Shut the fuck up, Bo, for fuck's sake. The weapons sergeant defended himself. What? He looked like a fucking raccoon. The communications sergeant, Kim Seok Jin, also referred to as just Jin. He was the most unassuming out of everyone here, and almost seemed harmless. He was just a little taller than the female, and was equally as pale as Findlay and Bo, but his features were different. Klaxus introduced himself to Jin, and was surprised Jin grabbed his hand in a shake and bowed. He was finally acknowledged in a respectful manner. Maybe I can get along with this one, Klaxus thought to himself as the last member was being introduced. The intelligence sergeant went by the name Sergei. The man was eyeing Klaxus up and down as if he was measuring him. What the fuck are you wearing? Sergei seemed baffled. His arms folded with the look of what Klaxis could only assume was disgust. Klaxis looked down at his pristine and pressed dark blue war armor. It had a sash across it denoting his rank and unit in gold. Klaxis opened his mouth to retort but was cut off. No, I actually don't care. Don't even say anything, Sergei said in exasperation, and he quickly closed the gap and started taking things off his armor. Alarmed, Klaxis tried to stop him, but the strong man didn't even pay heed to his attempt. You don't need this, or this. You certainly don't need this fucking thing. What the fuck is this? Is this a fucking air horn? Klaxis was effectively being stripped, the clangs of ceramic armor plating hitting the floor, high-strength plastics skidding across the room. How do you people fight? All this shit just screams, hey, I'm here, shoot me! Sergei then looked at Gabe and said, Go to the fab and make some shit for this retard before he gets us killed. I'll send you measurements. Gabe sighed and looked up in exasperation, and then stood up, walking out the door grumbling. Klaxis was flustered and snapped. We fight with honor! We don't hide among the grass like you barbarians! Just as Gabe walked through the door, you could hear a single bark of amusement. Yeah, sure. Sergei stood annoyed after finally ripping off nearly all of Klaxis' gear. The only thing remaining was a single ablative plate on his chest to stop energy weapons, his boots, water pack, and his weapons. Klaxis' resistance increased when Sergei was stripping off the actual armor. How am I supposed to fight? I need those. Sergei slapped his hand and just said, Relax. You'll even thank me later. Ounces equal pounds and pounds equal pain. Jesus, you don't even need any of this shit. Klaxis submitted and resigned to his fate. When Sergei finished tearing off all his gear and finished measuring him with his datapad, the intelligence sergeant looked at Findlay and pushed Klaxis into the briefing room. Findlay, amused by all this, went into the briefing room with a poor forward mammal after being violated. Klaxis looked at him, his temper nearing its limit, and growled. Am I to lead this group of ruffians into battle? These barbarians don't even have an officer to control them. By the Emperor, do you mean to let me rein them in? The heavy barking of amusement echoed in the briefing room. No. Not only no, but fuck no. You are to be subordinate to Master Sergeant Ives. Klaxis was horrified, his mouth flapping, unable to utter the respects he was supposed to give a superior officer. You want me to be led by the enlisted? This is preposterous. I'll report this to my commander. You people are insane. Findlay pulled out his datapad and showed Klaxis that orders had come from the High Marshal, the commanding officer of all ground forces on the planet. You are to do exactly what you are told, or the powers that be will re-examine whether or not you stay an officer. A shame that a promising lieutenant was demoted to a private. Klaxis nearly squeaked in terror. Years of schooling followed by years at the academy, and the amount of credits his family had spent on concessions for Duke Erex to give him a chance at officership made him shake. His newfound peerage was at stake, and he would rather die than be a commoner again. His command had consigned him to death. It seemed joining the ranks of nobility was a dream after all. The mammal relented, and Findlay immediately brightened up as he yelled. Great! Let's get this meeting started. We need to be gone in 30 minutes. 90 minutes later. Dressed in the same strangely painted armor as his human counterparts, Klaxis sat on a bench next to Gabe as he watched a blur of jungle foliage run by. He was riding in the most heavily armed transport craft he had ever seen. They were low, very low, and going very fast. He felt he could reach out and touch the jungle canopy. However, as nervous as he was about the ride, his mission they were tasked with felt like a fever dream. These things were delusional. They were to conduct a long-range patrol deep into enemy territory, observe enemy movements, listen into enemy communications, and shadow them. They were to fly 50 kilometers away from their target and to proceed on foot to their area of operations, navigating the dense jungle and its swamps. This was madness, Klaxis thought. Pure madness. His face was irritated by the dye they put on his fur to blend in with the foliage. That accursed female seemed giddy to be the one to apply the dye. Klaxis sighed as he looked up and down, trying not to think of that vicious smile, and high-pitched barking as his face was being rubbed like he was still a pup. To help cope with the situation, Klaxis paid more attention to the craft they were riding in and its crew. It was strange. 4 dedicated crew and redundant systems were added to the most standard transport VTOL. The former sleek and brightly blue-colored VTOL turned into a black and blocky aircraft. Its former sleek design now had sensors and systems sticking out of it, making it look jagged. The heavily modified utility aircraft had any weapon the humans could think to bolt on, bolted on. A 30mm rail autocannon on its nose slaved to the co-pilot. Two 12mm three-barreled rotary railguns on the sides, next to the sliding doors, were manned by 2 extra crewmen. The humans also added 2 rocket pods on the winglets, holding 19 high-explosive rockets each. And next to these pods were 4 unknown missiles, with sensors in the front constantly swiveling like an eyeball. Klaxis was brought out of his reverie when his HUD received a ping and the human next to him held out one finger and said over comms, "1 minute!" Every human double-checked their weapons to make sure they were properly loaded. Almost everyone's weapons were the same, except with minor variations of personal effect and attachments. A chemical kinetic weapon with a short 10-inch barrel, and what humans call a suppressor on the front to reduce sound signature and eliminate muzzle flash. The weapon used 7x45mm caseless ammunition, and the propellant was a new form of plastic explosives designed especially for firearms. Klaxis had pondered why the humans didn't move on to energy-based weapons, and the answer he received was, "Mechanical weapons don't break when you EMP them." Checking his rifle and adjusting his headset and augmented reality eyewear, he heard the call-out for 30 seconds. Looking down, he wondered how the hell they were going to get into the jungle without a clearing. 10 seconds! Everyone stood up and adjusted the rucksack and stood by the door. The door slides open. A large rope drops down. The humans, one by one, firemen rappelled down the ropes. Klaxis was the last one out as he grabbed the rope. "I can't turn back now," he thought. Klaxis descended into the darkness below. "Darkstar? This is Malice. Be advised. We're on the ground and making our way to AO. Over."